right. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. We made it into the week. We're here, the weekly live automation live stream. The live stream, if you will. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. I think every week we're doing something different. Kind of makes it interesting. I know that I said last time that we were going to take this session and make it about setting up a developer environment on Mac. This was because I recently got a new Mac computer to replace my Windows desktop. And, well, replace is a little bit strong of a word. The reality is that I want the Windows machine to do what it does really well, which is play video games. And I want my work computer to be my actual work computer. So the days of playing around with WSL2 on Windows are over for now. We're just going to be focusing on doing things in Mac. But hopefully you're able to watch like the first session that we did, first live stream where we set up a developer environment on Windows. Hopefully you're able to take those steps and kind of replicate them for Mac. Shouldn't be too difficult. So what we are going to do, though, is we're going to dust off our Python scripting skills, and we are going to build a chatbot, specifically within Slack. Now, this idea is that whenever I run a certain command in Slack, I want to be able to interface with a remote system. In my case, that remote system is going to be Prisma Access. But you could absolutely take this and make it interact directly with firewalls or your management system or routers or switches or whatever. So the end target device that you're going to be interacting with, it doesn't have to be a SaaS solution. It doesn't have to be a piece of software. It might just be a router or switch or a firewall. And that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. So let's talk a little bit about how this is all going to look, because we're going to be playing with a lot of different pieces here today, and I want to make sure that we all get this right. So I am struggling. Let's see if I can get I was hoping I would have my etch and sketch board, but again, I'm working on a new computer, so I'm going to expect a ton of technical problems this time. We usually run into technical issues and they're kind of fun to work through, but let me see if I can't etch and sketch this in Adobe Illustrator to kind of convey all the different components, how they're going to be working together, and what is our desired outcome here. All right, so let's create a new. Sure, that's fine. Let's create a new document here. Let's bring this up. All right, there's probably better ways of creating these kind of dashboards like a Visio or Lucid chart or something like that. But I kind of default into Adobe Illustrator. And it's just a relic of my previous life as a failed graphic design artist. And once I start drawing, you will quickly understand why I was a failed design artist, for sure. Okay, so at the end of the day, we're going to be left with oh, come on. Now, don't do that to me. Let's get this. There we go. So we're going to be having my Mac right here, right? I'm just going to, oh, this is good. Oh, that's amazing. So that represents my computer. If the art didn't just give it away. All right. And on this computer, I'm going to be using the Slack application. So let me try to draw Slack here. I think the logo goes something like this, right? It's kind of like these arrows. Oh, this is hilarious. Okay, so it kind of looks like this, and then this one's going to be short, this one's going to be long, and this one's going to be short, and this one's going to be long. Hey, it's Slack, right? So on my Macintosh, I'm going to be using Slack. There we go. I got to get my tablet out working again. This is hilariously bad. All right, so on my computer, I'm going to be using Slack. All right, now at the end of this, we're going to have a solution here. Let me try to draw a cloud. Oh, this is going to be good. Oh, I hope you guys are gobbling this up. Okay, inside of here, we're going to call this sassy, right? Technically, like the actual product that I may be working with is called Prisma. This is welcome to Bob Ross. We got some happy clouds over here. So this is going to be this is called Prisma Access, and if you didn't know, it is the core component of Palo Alto Network's SASE solution. And what we're going to do is we're going to have let's change the color here. Let's go purple. All right, we're going to have this guy talk to this guy, right? Back and forth. This is the line of communication that's going to take place. So what do we need for this to actually be a successful solution? Well, we need some kind of programming language that's going to be able to handle the request, make API calls, receive data back, and then present that data within Slack. So we need something that's going to be able to kind of handle this, and that's where Python will come into play. So we will have a Python script. You know, it's just as easy for me to just type these words out. I don't know what's going on with me today. But we're going to have a Python script. And you can just imagine there was some words on each line that will ultimately be able to take in the request from Slack and handle the actual building of the communication in between these two systems, right? And so that's what we're going to be using Python for. So the actual workflow is going to look kind of like this for the most part. And then ultimately what I want to do is I don't want to run this Slack bot on my local computer forever, right? I want to actually move it into a Kubernetes environment. So we're going to containerize this Python script, and then we're going to deploy it as a container image onto Kubernetes. So we're going to start here, and once this is done and it's working, this is a big if, right? But if we get this up and working, then I want to containerize the Python script and then deploy it on Kubernetes. So I'm no longer depending on my actual computer to be online in order for this solution to work. So let's do this in baby steps. What I need to do is I already have a Slack workspace. They're free to set up, by the way. Same with the developer account, completely free. Nothing really here requires money except for the access solution. Again, this component is like, it's not that important for today. Like this could be anything that allows us to talk to it in a programmatic fashion. We can make it effectively anything. So in my case, I've been working a lot with the Prisma Access SASE solution. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. Inside of the Python script, let's also kind of detail some of this out. I don't know, what's really popping. Let's go with red. All right. So within here, you see how much easier it is? All right, so we're going to use a Python SDK. Let's kind of pump that up just a bit. Oh, that's not what I meant. Font. Let's make this 60 points. All right, so we're going to be using a Python SDK, a software developer kit, and it effectively, if you're unfamiliar with the role that a software developer kit or an SDK provides, it's basically like providing some basic building blocks to help you get off the ground and running with your automation. Now, the one that we're going to be using today, actually we're going to be using two. We're going to be using Python SDKs. One, we're going to be using Bolt, which is the Slack SDK. Bolt, I believe, was originally written in JavaScript, but they also have ported it over for Python and probably Java and probably something else. But we're going to be working within the Python, and it greatly simplifies interacting with or building Slack bots. So a lot of like the API calls that take place underneath the sheets, in addition to things like authentication and authorization, all that's going to be handled by the SDK. We just need to know how to work with it. And I'm thinking that we're probably going to be using the, what is it called? Pan API, which is the Prisma Access SDK. That's the one that I've been building the Ansible collections around. So if you've watched some of the previous sessions where we've done Dead Man Hide. Good to see you again. Do you prefer to program with or without using object-oriented programming in Python? Hey, Dead Man Hide. Is that a cat, man? I love cats. So I definitely prefer building things in an object-oriented fashion. And we will be doing that today. We will be using probably Pydantic, which is it's another library. We'll just go ahead and include that into here as well. Thanks for the question. We're also going to be using Pydantic. And this effectively is another Python package that allows us to build our own set of data class sets. So we're going to be creating some custom classes in Python that will help us mostly validate the data. So we'll use Pydantic to validate data that's put into the Slack bot, and we will use Pydantic to validate the response data that we get back from the APIs. PES book or R? Hamant Bali, I don't know what your question means. Could you rephrase it for me? I constantly need things broken down for me. Oh, look at me misspelling our own solution. How embarrassing. One second, let me get this blanket out. Bye-bye, blanket. All right. Best books or tutorial to learn. No worries. No worries. I thought it was an incomplete thought. There's a lot of really great books out there. There's a lot of trash books. I feel like I've managed to find all of the trash books and stumbled around with them. And I found some really great books. In relation to Python, let me see, what would be some of my recommendations? I would recommend checking out two different publishers. One is No Starch Press, and look in Python. There's a couple of really great ones. Automate the Boring Stuff with Python. This is a classic. This is one of the defaults. I would also recommend Beyond the Basic Stuff with Python. So once you kind of have a firm grasp of some of the fundamentals on Python, go a little bit deeper. I believe this one focuses on like how to write clean code, how to debug code, all of like the really important stuff. But I would say like start probably here. I think this is a good starting point. I might be wrong. Let's look at this one real quick. Let's look at the what this covers here. Table of contents, Python basics, flow control, functions, list, dictionaries. Yeah, start with this one if you can, and then move on to Beyond the Basic Stuff. At that point, you should have a firm enough grasp to start kind of building some ideas that you have. And once you've got that figured out and you're really, moving along quite well, then I highly encourage, where is it? Where are you at? This one, Object-Oriented Python. This book was like finally understanding how to build object-oriented programming. They do it by using like a Pygame. So you learn about object-oriented programming through an example of building a video game, which is really cool. I don't think I actually finish this book. I think I got till probably right around here. And at that point, I was like, holy crap, I get it. Like, I finally understand classes and building these object-oriented programs. Totally get it. Maybe I went a little bit deeper. But a friendly note, you don't always have to finish the books that you start. Just get out of them what you want. So this is a really great publisher. Those 3 books that I have used from them have been outstanding. There's another one. Oh, geez. They had a huge sale recently. What is the name of that? Like A Press publisher? I think it's this one. It might have been this one. It might have been a different one. But one of these publishers had like this sale about a month ago where like everything was $5. And like I spent like about like 30 books. I was like, oh my goodness. We'll see if I actually read any of them. I don't know if it was A Price. I think it was another publisher, but anyway, competitor. What do you got? Who is a competitor solution to A Press? No Starch, yeah. Pearson. Maybe it was. O'Reilly's good. O'Reilly has some good books, especially once you want to get a little bit deeper into. They also have like a series called they call it Up and Running, which is like a kind of like baby steps into anything that you're looking for. Those are really good, but they also do some deep dives. I really like it. Packet was the website that had like a $5 special one weekend, and I went absolutely bananas on it. Let me see if there's the book that I read from here that I bought was around Django, because I was building a lot of Django stuff. So I don't know if that's necessarily beginner material, but hopefully it's good. Yeah, no problems. You're welcome. Hey, XY. How come you are online? You said you would be on the road or something. Next week. So on the 10th, I'm going to be on the road and be driving across the southwest of the United States and going to be taking it all in on a business trip to Las Vegas. So I will not be here next week, but the week after, I definitely will. So thanks again for hanging out. I always love seeing you guys come back. Okay. All right. So here's my little etch and sketch. It's it's adorable. I want to hang it on my mother's refrigerator. I'm so proud of it. But effectively, this is what we're going to be doing, right? On our Mac computer, we're going to be using Slack to interface with Prisma Access. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to write a Python script that kind of sits in between. Now, what happens when you deploy this SDK, or when you run your script, the script's going to be running in the foreground, right? Meaning like I type in Python and then the name of the script, and then it loads, and it just waits, and it waits, and it waits. So what happens during this process, because this is probably going to be good to know. There's not going to be an exam at the end of this, but might be helpful to kind of get a little bit better understanding before we start building this out. All right. So when I open up Slack and I'm going to type in, let's say I type in /Prisma, there we go. What I want to have happen is when I hit enter, that's going to send a request up to Slack. I should have drawn this a little bit better. So there's another cloud. It's going to kind of hang out right in here, right? This is hilarious. Looks like a bad airplane or like a whale or something. But anyway, this is going to be Slack. And this is actually how the workflow goes. I made a mistake earlier. Let's erase some of this. Oh, heavens. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so what's going to happen is that when I type in /Prisma, that's going to send a request up here to up to Slack. And Slack's going to look at things like, well, who are you? Are you authenticated? Or do you have the capability of running this command? And if everything checks out, there's going to be something in Slack to tell it to redirect to my Python script, right? So this kind of communication is kind of interesting, and it's really important to understand. Slack is going to send a request to a Python script that's running on my computer. So if you've got your network security or your network engineering hat on, you're thinking, does that mean I have to like poke holes in my firewall in order to allow this communication? The answer is no, because one of the things that the Slack SDK bolt does is whenever you initiate the Python script, you remember it's running like in the foreground, the SDK is actually going to build a TLS connection up to Slack. And once that connection is there and it's established, then Slack can send requests all day long and not have to worry about the ports being opened or anything along those lines, because it was the client, which is the SDK, the client built the connection up to Slack, and that's an active session. And then Slack just needs to use that session to send requests back down here to the script, which will then be punted up to SASE. So if I had to kind of map this out, I would say step 1 is run this command, right? And then step 2 is Slack will redirect that command to the Python script. And then step 3, the Python script will interact with whatever remote system that we want. That's the general workflow that we got here. Okay, all right. So that's 30 minutes of me talking with an etch and sketch pad. Let's get this ball rolling, huh? All right, so we know what we want to build. Let's go to api.slack.com. Again, the developer accounts are free. Workspaces are free. Don't pay for anything if you're just building stuff. That's not the way that we want to do things. All right, let's close out this one. And let's open up our apps here. Okay, so it looks like I already have an app called Prisma. Let's go ahead and delete that, because I created this a few months ago, and I don't want it to confuse us. So we're going to say, yeah, go ahead and delete this app. So once you log in, let me turn off dark mode here. All right, so once you log into Slack with your email account, you're going to see all the instances. You'll be able to have the ability to create a new application within the instances or workspaces that you're associated with. So in my case, I've got one for Ansible AWX, and I've got one for TeamCity. TeamCity was the CI/CD step or the CI/CD tool that I was using within my home environment. See, thanks. And you will see some Prisma response directly in Slack in step 4. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Once the API call was made on step 3 to Prisma Access, you will then get a return response that will ultimately come back to your client. Actually, the return response, if we're being technical, looks like this, which would step 4, which would then be rendered inside of your client back here for step 5. Boy, this is terribly hilarious. All right. Thanks for pointing out. You're absolutely right. We got numbers all over the place. I wanted to have something graphically to help kind of illustrate the workflow, to help make it clearer. I don't think we got that. I think we just muddied the waters significantly, but that's fine. That's okay. All right. So where are we at? Back here. Let's go ahead and start by creating a new application. And we're going to do things from scratch. Now, let me talk about it really quick. They recently, or it looks like it's still in beta, they recently have this option to do an app manifest. And what that is, at the end of the day, it's basically a YAML file that has all of the parameters of your application. So if you're building these like consistently and a lot, you don't want to have to just keep on clicking all the right points within the user interface. And you can instead use an application manifest to get the job done. But we'll start the hard way. We'll go with just doing things manually. We're going to call this Prisma Access because that's the end device. And I want this installed on the Redtail Consulting workspace. So whatever workspaces that your account is in, you'll see them on this drop-down menu. Okay. Ooh, a lot of options, and I don't remember which ones I need. I think I need almost all of them. But let's start with the most important. Let's add an application icon. I want this to look pretty. All right, so we've got a folder here with all my brand logos. And there we are. And something nice and concise. This looks good. That looks terrible. That's small. Oh, these are so small. Let's move to, how big is that? 75 by 75. That's way too small. I think Slack has a requirement that it needs to be, there we go. It needs to be 512 by 512 at minimum. Where's the requirements at? They're probably on this page behind us. This one, I created it as 513 by 513 just so that I wouldn't have Slack yell at me. There we go. All right, and we need a nice dark background color. So what can I do for this? Want to make it blue, but here's the deal. Like, if you make it too light, they'll tell you, hey, you got to make it dark. Slack wants that dark mode. So how about this-ish? Is that good enough? Let's move this down. Try to make it somewhat similar to the actual logo. I would say that's pretty close to the logo. So let's darken it just a bit. Now it looks like mud. It looks ugly. Let's go with it. And yeah, so in the description, so this Slack bot will simplify the way we interact. No, this is the most exciting thing in the world. Doesn't really matter. Nice. You agree? Okay. I'm not going to add a longer description. You guys know what we're here for. So let's go ahead and save that just so that the pretty icon is there. Okay. I think we need to go through and we will probably be adding things every step of the way. So spoiler alert, everyone, I haven't built a bot in Slack in like 4 months. So I'm going to run into a lot of problems and mistakes, but we'll get through it. We will persevere. Let's see. I'm going to start with the slash command. Now, a slash command is basically what someone's going to type within Slack to initiate the bot itself. So in our case, we're going to call this Prisma. And I don't think I need a request URL. So I'm going to leave that empty. And we're going to say interact with Prisma Access. Oh, which rocket to launch? No, we're good. This field can't be empty. We'll send an HTTP post request with this information. Let me see what I've done in the past. We'll be doing a lot of copy and paste here. Let's go back to my apps. Let's look at Ansible. I probably shouldn't have deleted the previous working iteration of this. Let's look at add function and features. Oh boy, that's not going to do it for me. What about Team City? Did we have something? I don't think we had something. Okay. Well, I said we're going to have roadblocks. We're going to have challenges. And I think we've got one. Let me try to log into a different workspace here. Let me duplicate this. And let's see, sign into another workspace. I know I've got another bot that's working. Let me just move this over here. Okay. And let's come back over into your apps. Sign into another workspace. And I'm going to pick on... I know I'm not sharing my screen. I'll be right back. Prisma, we're going to open this one. XY asks the question. So Prisma doesn't send back... Oops. Prisma doesn't send back the response to the Python script. It sends it back directly to Slack. The answer is yes. The response will go directly to Slack. The reason for that is that Slack is the ultimate destination for the message, right? That's ultimately where we want it. We want it effectively to be posted in one of our channels. We don't want it really sent to the Slack script or to the Python script because that's not really going to address any kind of the desired outcome here. So, okay, there we go. Is it this one? And so here, let me show you what I did here. I wrote a Slack app. Let me make sure this is the right one. Called the Dubs God. And this basically is the wrong one. Maybe it's this one. Add apps. Okay, good. Okay, so this is the right one. So let's talk. This is a little app. All it does is it basically allows people to effectively roll two sets of dice. And if the two numbers at the end match each other, then that's the winner, right? It's kind of like a randomization thing. So we call it the dubs because it's the doubles. And so let's talk about the app architecture first. What are all these features? What do they do, and why we want to add them into our own Prisma Access? Well, incoming webhooks gives us the ability to send external messages into a Slack workspace. So if you've got a firewall that generates a bunch of logs, and you want those logs to be received, that would be considered an external source from the perspective of the bot. I don't think I've got anything on here. Oh, we've got some basic URLs. So we'll take the webhook URL. The slash command itself, let's look at the... See, there is no... okay. So that's what we did wrong. So when we come into here, there's a... Am I even in the right app yet? Boy, I'm all over the place. Okay, so we've got this request URL. The thing is, I didn't think that we needed this. This is more of a legacy way of doing things. If we were to poke holes in our firewalls and send this request into our environment, then we would need a request URL because Slack would be looking for an idea as to where do I send this message, all right? In our case, we don't need that because what we're actually doing is we're using the SDK. So before I even enable slash commands inside of my app, what we need to add the functionality first is for event subscriptions. This is going to allow the SDK to run in what's called a sockets mode, where it's that exact architecture that we kind of drew up earlier here. I think in order for me to enable sockets, though, I'm going to have to create permissions. We'll see. There's probably a good documentation somewhere. It's probably somewhere here, but I'm way too stubborn to read documentation. So we're just going to go ahead and turn this on. And I'm going to say enable events. So the event in this case will be that a slash command was entered. Right? Event can be a couple of different things. Like if somebody says a specific phrase in Slack, that phrase could be an event trigger. Like if somebody said LOL inside of Slack, then you could use that as an event trigger, which would then like go and grab a funny GIF and paste it. So anytime anyone anywhere typed LOL in Slack, a GIF would be randomly appeared, right? Not a really great example, but an example nonetheless. In our case, we're not going to be using it for the actual the messages. We're going to be using a Slack command or a slash command. So that will be one of them. Where'd it go? Okay. So let's look at what I did for this one under the event subscriptions, because this is, okay. So socket mode is enabled. You won't specify a request URL. In this case, again, the SDK is playing the role of the socket. So subscribe to bot events. We're going to need these permissions, by the way. These will all be added to the OAuth scope, which will effectively declare what the bot can do and what it can read, right? It all comes down into this OAuth scope. So we'll get to that for sure in a second. So subscribe to events. Again, if it's a message or conversation, don't really care. Interesting. It looks like I might need to start with socket mode more than anything. So let's come back over here. Let's enable socket mode. And let's turn off dark mode. All right. So use socket mode. There we go. So this is going to generate a token for us. We'll call this the Prisma socket token. And we need to add some, again, some permissions as to what this bot can actually do. And the ones that I think are predefined, we need to do what? So regarding event subscriptions, let's look at our options. Connections write, authorizations read, app configuration write. I think the only thing that I need, let's add them all. We can change the permissions later, but it looks like we'll just add them all. All right, so what just happened? We just generated an application level token. This is one of two tokens that we're gonna need to document. The app token will start with x-app and a random string. And underneath that, here's your scope. Here's all the things that you can do with this token. So we're gonna copy that, and let's open up a new instance of Visual Studio Code here. All right, and we will, let's say, development public, and we'll call the repo Prisma access slackbot. And we'll open this up. Prisma access slackbot. Okay. Cool. Let me go ahead and stash my token inside of here. We're going to say this is the Slack app token. All right. And don't get excited. These tokens, they're all going to be deleted as soon as this stream is over. So you got about an hour's time frame to mess with me on the stream if you wanted to grab my tokens. But for now, let's do this. We got the Slack app token. We're going to need another one here pretty soon. And okay, so with the socket mode enabled, then we should be able to come back over into basic applications, and let's look into event subscriptions. Okay, so this time when we enabled the events, since we enabled the socket mode, we no longer need to pass in the request URL. Let's see, the bot events. This is where we control what type of things we want to key off of here. So let me copy what I've done in the past. Let's look at event subscriptions. And message channel, message groups, message IM, and message, I think that's like, yeah, multi-party, or I view that as multicast, but very well. Message channels, groups, and IM. Message channels, message groups, and message IM, and message MPIM. All right. I think that's it. Anything else? Events on behalf of users? Nope. And unfurl domains? Nope. All right, so that's a good start. So there's our subscriptions. Now I want to create a slash command. So let's create a new command here. We'll call this Prisma. If I can slow typing. It's a new computer, so I mistyped. That's my excuse. Let's see. Interact with Prisma access 3 exclamation points. And hit save. All right. Starting off pretty good. Hopefully that's a pretty simple thing to ingest kind of what we're doing here. Let's move back and see if there's anything else. Client ID. In this case, I've enabled webhooks, but I don't think I need to. I don't think I need to, so I'm not going to. I'm not going to send messages to this bot from something like a firewall or anything along those lines. So I think permissions and bots are the last two things. Let's look at permissions really quick here. So in this case, this is my bot user OAuth token for this specific bot. Remind myself to regenerate that once we're done here. Okay, so we've got some basic apps and functionality. Let's look into the permissions. So I don't have it on the Prisma Access because we haven't actually installed the bot to the workspace yet. Anything else around scopes that I might need to include? Let's look down here. Channels, chat write, command, group history, IM, incoming webhook, chat channel command. Okay, I think these were all generated based on what we had selected previously. Any user tokens, restrictions? Nope. Okay, good to go. So let's install this into our workspace now. This should generate the OAuth, the other side of the token. Allow. And now I've got the bot user token. All right, so let's come back up here. Bot user token. So they look different. A bunch of random gobbledygook here, but for the most part, the app token is going to start with XApp, and then the bot user token is going to be XOXB. So we'll need those two things. We will also need the name of the channel that we want to post this to. Now I've gone ahead and included the channel. Where is it? Right here. I've created a bot channel right here. And the way that I figure out the channel that I want is I look at the view channel details. And at the very bottom right here, we've got this nice little ID. So I'm going to need to copy that because that's where we're going to be sending our messages to. Slack channel ID. Is it possible to send the response in Python and filter sensitive data before sending it to Slack? Filter sensitive data before we send it to Slack. So what I will say is, like, once we get into the Slack modals, we haven't gotten there yet, but it's basically like the user interface that we're going to create. It's going to be a little pop-up window inside of Slack. Inside of that modal, we have the ability to do client-side validation. I know it's not really what you're asking right now, but effectively what we can do is we can check to see if certain parameters are matched. Basically doing like input data validation, right? Like if I'm expecting a phone number, right? Then the user cannot enter letters. They got to enter an area code. It's got to be separated with a dash or a dot. Maybe have a country code included. We have the opportunity within the modal to do like client-side validation in that regard. but I don't think we have the ability to like strip out data, specifically sensitive info. Can you give me an example of what you'd want? Like, what would be sensitive data that you want to strip out? The first thing I think of is like username, password, or API tokens, or something along those lines. But Hermont Bali, why are there two different tokens created? Good question. One is for the application itself, the Slack bot that we are writing. The Slack bot, or it's an application at the end of the day. And we also have a bot user that consumes this application. You can have one Slack bot user, or you can have multiple Slack bot users, but they would all be underneath the umbrella of the actual application. So there's two levels of permission, because there's two levels of granular control that we need. I hope that makes sense. That's the way that I'm interpreting this. I'm not an expert on OAuth, and I'm definitely not an expert with Slack. But that's the way that I'm viewing this right now. The app token gives it controls the permissions of what the application can do, and then the bot user token controls what types of actions can the actual bot user do underneath that application. Right. For example, license key or something, you just want to check if it's expired or not, and you don't want to send the whole license information. I don't think so. I don't think so. Something has to do the determination on whether or not it's expired, right? What I would expect is that it would be the remote endpoint that would ultimately decide, hey, this license it's invalid or it's expired or something like that. And in order for that system to make that determination, it's got to get the whole license key or the whole enchilada in order to be able to say whether or not it is. But in the event that you wanted to strip see, like I don't see it. I don't see the use case. Because we ultimately need to send everything in the request that needs to be in there, right? And so the request is going to have the Slack app token. It's going to have the bot user token. These things are going to be used in building the connection and establishing the connection, all the permissions used. Everything else is basically user input, what the users are going to put into the form. And in that case, in that scenario, the form's got to have everything. I can't see a scenario where we could strip something out and then the remote endpoint would be happy with what was sent over. We got to send it everything. But if you really, really wanted to, what you could do, no, I don't think you can. I might be wrong. There might be something. We'll look at this later. Excuse me. We'll look at something when we're building the modal. We're going to be using something called Slack Block Kit, I think it's called. It basically is just going to give us a shortcut, like a predefined example where we can kind of create the modal. I wonder in there if we'll find an option of manipulating user data. We'll see some kind of examples that we can base that off of. So you send the information back to Python script, and the Python script processes the data and sends another response back to Slack. That's effectively what the SDK is doing, like what you described right there. The user input, all right, so let me just talk through this again. Sorry for the slide. The user input is going to come inside of this Slack form. Whatever I put inside of this form is going to go up in, it's going to talk to Slack. And Slack is going to look and it says, based on this command, right, we see that you're supposed to be redirected to this specific active connection, this SDK. It's going to send the data here as JSON. So the JSON here, and then it's going to be received in Python. I feel like the object is converted from JSON into a Python dictionary by the time that it gets to the actual Slackbot script. But I don't remember if that's accurate. We'll soon figure this one out. And we will effectively, either it'll be structured as JSON or it will be structured as a Python dictionary. We'll effectively, at the end of the day, we'll have that form, all the data that was entered here, we'll have that in some kind of structured object. And then from there, that's what we use to pass on up into Prisma or whatever our remote endpoint is. In this case, right at this step, we have the opportunity, because it will be a Python object either natively given to us by the SDK, or we'll flip the JSON using the JSON dictionary. We'll effectively have a Python dictionary. So we have an opportunity right here to do data manipulation, to strip things out, but you will not have the opportunity to do it right here and right there. So if you were trying to prevent sensitive information from ever reaching Slack's API, that's not going to happen, because the data ultimately needs to get here. And if you cut it off at the knees, then it's never going to, the full data payload will never reach there. Now, I guess it would be possible to stage any sensitive information in the Python script, right? And we will be doing this, where we're going to take our app token and the bot token, we're going to be rolling them into an environment variable, and then we'll be presenting that to the script. So it would be hidden from Slack, it would be hidden from the user, it would reside only right here as a part of a secret file, a secret environment variable, and then that would be sent up there. So I guess, like, if there's something like super sensitive, username, password, API tokens, social security number, if there's something that's really sensitive information that you don't want it to arrive at Slack, try to stage it into your Python script and load it as like an environment variable or something else. That way that you prevent, that stuff from happening. Python script is not a client. Client is a Slack user. So I'm going to disagree with you on that. I'm going to say they're both clients, and Slack is actually the server in both instances. The reason why I will die on this hill, and look, I might be wrong, right? But the way that I view it is that the Python script is 100% a client. And the reason why I say that is that think about the way that TCP is structured, right? We got a source and we got a destination, right? For the TCP stream. And in this case, the source is going to be the Python SDK, and the destination is going to be the Slack API. When we initiate this, it's going to build a TCP tunnel, or not tunnel, I'm sorry. It's going to build a TCP session. The destination port on that TCP session will be port 443. So 443, and it would be some kind of rando number here, right? Some random generated number. So looking at this from the perspective of TCP, the Python script is absolutely a client. And this that actually says random. I think I don't know what it looks like it says, but it's supposed to say random. So from the perspective of TCP, and this is critical because this means effectively, if this is the client and the client lives inside of your network, then you don't need to poke holes in order to enable the communication from the outside coming back, right? Just like in your own corporate environment, you got a firewall. You don't have to open up port 80 on the outside interface to be able to send traffic, return traffic back to the client, because that would be just a terrible design. And that way, this script is absolutely a client. The destination here is Slack API, and the Slack client that we have, our desktop application, is also a client, where when we start up Slack, it has a destination of port 443 to the Slack API, and that's how it gets all the Slack messages in there. So ultimately, the response comes to the user. The response does come to the user, but only because the user is connected to Slack API. The user's Slack application never talks directly to the Python script, is completely unaware of it. But yes, the response will ultimately be sent up into Slack, and then anyone with their client open would receive that message. Absolutely. How we doing? We're good. We're good. Keep the questions coming, man. Or the comments coming. And keep me in check. All right. I promised myself I'd not talk so much this time. I think I'm not doing a good job of that either. All right. So here again, we've got 3 crucial pieces of information that we're going to need to roll into our application. The app token, the bot user token, and then the channel of the actual workspace that the message is going to be posted to. Now, on the Prisma side, we also need 3 bits of information. We need the tenant service group, which is basically your tenant ID for your Prisma Access tenant. We also need a user, and this would be a service account user. That word was really hard for me to write. And we also need a secret. Now, if you've used Prisma Access before, it also uses OAuth, but it has a multi-factor authentication process. So anytime you log into the system, you log in with your username and password, and you get a message on your phone that asks you to confirm if that was you that just logged in. If we're doing this from an automation, that's a no-go, right? That workflow would never be conducive. We don't want to have to tap our phone just because a bot was executed. I mean, you would have like a full-time staff that would just be responding. That would be terrible. You don't want that. So there's this ability in Prisma Access to create a service account. That's effectively what we're going to be using here. The service account has an email address as the user. The secret will be basically the password for the service account. And then the tenant service group ID is something that's it's something that's presented to you within the GUI. I'm telling you all this because I'm not going to show you mine, right? That would be really dumb to do on a live stream. But if you were looking to recreate this, you would have to go to the tenant management and create a service account, and you would be presented with all this information. Now, if you're interacting with a firewall, I mean, probably the only thing you would need would be like username, maybe either username password combination or API token, depending on what platform that you're talking with. But yeah, so basically we would need to capture not just the Slack bot information stuff, but there's also secret information regarding our remote endpoints. Okay. All right. I feel like we're making pretty good progress, albeit relatively slowly. We're an hour in already. Let's see what we've got here so far. Collaborators don't need collaborators. Let's go back up here, to the basic information. Let's look at the functionality. Just based on what we've passed it, we're going to be using a / command. We've created the bot user. That's how the OAuth token process. So that was subsequent of the OAuth to permissions process. We're telling it that we want to run in socket mode and that we are going to subscribe to these events, being like anytime anyone runs the / command. And we've got our permissions. We've also installed it into the workspace. I think the only thing I need to do now is I need to add this bot let's see here, into the into the channel itself. So this is a step that I've forgotten many times and been really frustrated that I was like, why is this not working? What's going on? And it's because like I added the bot to the workspace, but I never added the bot user to the channel. So I'm just going to throw the little @ sign and we'll point to the app and hit enter. And then we'll get this message. It says, you want to add this person. And we'll just go ahead and yes. Yes, please. All right. So now we've got that. If I type in /Prisma, we can see that we've got there's our little short description that we had entered in the UI. But if I issue this right now, it's going to come back and it says, Prisma failed with the error dispatch failed. Now I haven't really dug into that error message, but what I'm thinking when I read that, what it's telling me is like somebody entered a / command and it was unable to kind of dispatch the application for one reason or the other. In our case, we've got nothing listening for that right now. So we're going to need to actually start building some Python scripts. So let's get our Python. Let me first take a quick break and we'll start working on the Python side. Okay, we're back. No questions, huh? All right, very well. What I like to do is I like to copy and paste as much as possible. So let's do that. Let's find some Slack Python Bolt examples. Oh, here, they got a nice little document for me. Let me take off dark mode for now. Just completely disable it. All right, we've gone through this. This is basically looks like something that we've done. Okay, here we go. Now we need to create our Python virtual environment. There we got the bot token. Then we have this should be the, I don't know if we use that one. Pip install Slack Bolt. All right. Okay, and this kind of goes into kind of next steps. We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and create a new virtual environment. I use Poetry. So let's kind of pump it up just a bit so everyone can see, everyone can follow along. Let's say Poetry init, and we're going to be the name of our package. Actually, I don't think I've set up my Git user profile on this computer. Sorry about that. Git config username is Calvin Rimsberg. Not in a Git directory. Oh, I'm sorry. Git config global username and git config global user email. That's good. Okay. Now with that said, I can go ahead and create a Python virtual environment with Poetry. If you're not using Poetry, you can always create a virtual environment like this by calling in the module of venv and then whatever the name of your virtual environment, and it will create one for you. But again, I'm using Poetry here, version 0.1. This is a Slack bot to interact with Prisma access. There's my name. The reason why I did the git config on my system, my brand new system, is because I hadn't hadn't populated the git config yet, and therefore my user, the author, would have been empty, and so my email address. So there we go. Apache 2.0. I'm running 3.11, which is very close to bleeding edge. You should, I think the dependency said that it was 3.6, at least for the bolt. Yeah. It looks like it needs to be Python 3.6 or later. So I'm running 3.11 because I just live on the edge. All right, so what packages do I want to add? So slack-bolt, let's search for that. And it looks like we got the very first instance. So we're going to say pick number 0. We will run with the latest bleeding edge. Let me think about whether or not I need to create like the request library. Yeah, let's go ahead and add it anyway, just in case. So request, this is the one of the easier ways of interacting with REST APIs. This will be how we talk to Prisma. I also want to install the Pan API SDK. Oh, I don't think that's on there. So can I skip that? Yeah, add a package. All right. Do I want to define my developer dependencies? Yes, I want to have IPDB. I also want to use black for my formatting. And I want to use Flake 8 for linting. I think that's it. And that looks good. That looks amazing. Let's create the virtual environment. And let's activate it. Poetry shell. All right. So we are now within the Python virtual environment. I can see that listed right here. Just now suddenly popped up in my shell. But we can validate it by typing in which Python, and it looks like here we are. This is the path. Now I want to update Visual Studio Code to use this path. And the way that we do that is Command or Control Shift P and type in Python select interpreter. And we're just going to pass in, hey, there it is. It found us. We're going to select this one. Now all the developer dependencies, things like the linter and the formatter are now loaded within our Visual Studio Code instance, so we can start hammering out some really ugly code here. All right. So I've got an example already, so I'm going to be cheating just quite a bit, but it will definitely make the viewer experience significantly better. So we're going to do it like that. All right, so first thing we should do is say have a comment at the top. So Slackbot for Prisma access, and that's good enough. We will save this as our, there we go, app.py. All right, it doesn't look like it determined our Python interpreter. Let me make sure. There we go. Okay. No, we're good to go. All right, so Slackbot for Prisma access. And so I just like to give a nice little friendly message. Let's start off by importing some of the standard Python library stuff. So import OS. We're going to use this for pulling out our environment variables. So we'll need to talk to the operating system to be able to extract that information. We're going to import JSON, obviously, to help us work with JSON data, change things back and forth between JSON and Python. Import logging, sure. We will be building just a small little logging functionality here. Import time. I don't remember why. There might be a... Oh, I think I was doing like a speed run where I was kind of speed testing the different transactions, and so maybe that's where I was importing time. So those are all coming from the standard library. We're also going to import third-party, and from here, this is where we're going to pull in the from Slack bolt import app. So this is the foundation of the Slack bolt Python SDK. This is what's going to create an instance of our application. It's going to handle the authentication into the remote Slack servers. It's going to be able to, again, receive messages over that sockets connection. So this is the big boy right here. So from Slack bolt, you'll see us importing a lot of functionality into the Slack bolt. Slack adapter, socket mode, import socket mode handler. Obviously, the thing that'll handle the actual TCP session in between us and the cloud. We will run into a lot of problems. Oh, look, my IDE is good. Yes, we're going to run into problems. So we want to be able to import all the Slack API errors to help our debugging. Anything else? From .env, import load.env. So this is something that we forgot to install. So let's go ahead and add it into our poetry file right now. So poetry add, and I think it's python.env. And let's just test this out. Let's also add in a poetry add group for developers, for all the developer dependencies. I'm going to add in IPython just because I like to do my debugging in IPython. I'm just I'm validating that this statement is going to work now that we've installed python.env. So from .env import load.env. Okay, so it will work. All right, good to go. That's all I was doing there. All right, so these are the third-party packages that we're going to import. And we're also going to be doing some real pretty object-oriented programming. So we're going to pull in some local imports, we'll say. And this is where our Pydantic data modeling is going to come into place. We're going to build a data model for the valid data that people can enter into the form, and also a data model to validate the data that comes back from the API. We try to do as much validation within the client as possible. We don't want bad data going to the API server, and we definitely want to make sure that any response data that we got back is also valid. So that's going to happen there. And I'm just going to leave this commented out for right now, but yeah, we'll say from Prisma. I'll tell you, man, GitHub Copilot is like, it's like it's like Game Genie. Like if you're from my era, Game Genie completely changed the way that we played video games, and it's just cheat codes all day, and that's effectively what GitHub Copilot is here. So I haven't even created this file yet, but it's automatically making a suggestion for me, so that's pretty nice. All right, from Prisma, import Prisma access. We'll just leave that for now. We'll create this Prisma script later, but again, I think the only thing that we'll do in there is just data validations and such. All right, so with that being said, let us add the tokens for our apps. Oh, we already captured that right here. So I'm going to hard code these into the app, but what I would usually do is I would store some of them within my environment variables. But for now, let's say hard code Slack tokens, and there we go, Slack bot token, and we're going to set this equal to the bot token, and then we're going to do Slack wait, no, it should be Slack app token, and this should be Slack bot token, and that will be the XO one, which is right there. All right, And we will also hard code the Slack channel. All right. So these are constants. They're never going to change. So I don't feel too bad about hard coding them here as these global variables right here. All right. So again, just passing in the basic information, but we will need to pull in the environment variables that I have set for my Prisma Access tenant. Tenant service group ID, username, and secret. So we're going to say load environment variables. We're going to do load.env. This loads this, that's this method that we're importing right here. It's going to be able to talk into our operating system, grab all the environment variables, and now I can set those equal to some kind of object here within the script, which we're going to do right now. So Prisma parameters, and we're going to create Prisma client ID is going to be equal to OS environ get and Prisma client ID. Oh, look at it. It's just going to shortcut all of this for me, isn't it? Oh my goodness. My boss only knew that like 80% of my code is actually just comes from my IDE auto-generating it. Maybe my value to the org would be viewed a little bit less, but it would probably be the truth. I don't have a subscription ID, so I don't know where it's going with that. We'll just leave that out for now. So we got the client ID. Again, that's my service account's username. We got the client secret, which is the service account's secret password. And then the tenant ID is the Prisma tenant ID. I'm pretty sure those are my environment variables. We'll soon see if that's wrong. All right. Okay, so coming along, let's look at this again from the top. We got a nice little comment at the top. We're doing our standard library imports. We imported the Slack SDK. We also imported something to help us load environment variables from our operating system. Here we're actually telling that functionality to execute, load those environment variables, and then we set them equal to these three new objects. And then we hard code in the Slack tokens for now. But what you would probably do is you would probably follow this design pattern just down here. But in our case, we're just gonna hard code them right there because I don't want to update my environment variables while I'm live streaming because I'll expose secrets, and I don't want to be that guy. All right, let's do something to kind of help my eyeballs out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some really obnoxious commenting because I find it helped me kind of focus my view. Let's do, yeah, like this up to line 79. And this is strictly for cosmetics. I don't suggest that you do this, but it just helps my eyeballs quickly laser into different sections of my Python scripts. So if you ever see this, that's what's happening. I'm creating effectively like a table of contents, and these are different chapters within there. So yeah, again, this section, loading all of our environment variables, should be pretty simple. We're going to create a logging object. So we're going to use this to log our information instead of using like print statements. We'll have a little bit better control over this. We're going to say, let's see, logger equals logging get logger name. Yep. I don't remember where I learned how to do this. So if you're interested in creating these custom loggers, do your Googling, you'll get there. But it is a part of the Python standard library. Okay. Yep. Thank you. What? All right. Let's actually create our Slack app. I'm just laughing at this auto completion stuff. This GitHub Copilot is ridiculous. Okay. So let's look into the Python SDK and I want to look specifically at whenever we initiate an instance, because I think this is important. All right, so again, oh my goodness, it's a new computer. Sorry for that. Oh my goodness. What's going on here with this web page? Okay. So again, here's the import for the SDK, and we're importing this class object called app. And app's got all of the things related to the actual application, authentication, all those goodies. Now, when we create an instance of this class object, in this case right here, we're initializing the application object, and we're going to be calling it app. Looks like there are parameters that need to be passed in. Now, they're using signing secrets. I'm not using a signing secret, so I think this might be the old way. I don't remember. But anyway, I'm only going to be passing in the token, which is going to be our Slack bot token that we had created above. So my instantiation of this is going to look just a little bit different, but the functionality is going to be ultimately the same here. App, and we're going to say token equals and Slack bot token. Yep. That will pull in this guy, and that is it the app token? I think it's the app token. Let me look here. Yeah, it's totally Slack token. No. Slack channel. How was I doing this before? All right. I think we need to use the app token. That's what makes sense. So we'll pull in like that. I don't know if my example that I have is good enough, but let's see. Then we need to just kind of start our application here. And that's all that's required. Okay, let's give this a run. Python app.py. All right. So what we were just able to do is we were able to validate a few different things. So right now, the Python script is running in the foreground. It's waiting to be called by the Slack server, which ultimately gets called from my Slack client on my workstation here. But what were we able to confirm is that our authentication worked successfully. So we were able to successfully connect to our instance by using the SDK. Interesting, we can hard code the internal port that it's running on, but again, that's really not necessary for us. All right, so that's a good start. Right now, the script is running. There's that active session. Actually, netstat. No, maybe I don't have netstat on here, but trying to see if I can actually see these are all Unix sockets. They're not TCP sockets. Oh wait, it's T. Yeah. All right. Anyway, we got a session. Just trust me on it. There's a session. It's active, and we'll just leave it be. Now I'm going to exit out of it. It's going to give me a bunch of errors, and that's okay because it wasn't a very graceful one. Rubber Duck plugin in VS Code. You can get ChatGPT. Yeah, true. It's true. Absolutely. Y79. I don't know what that was a reference to. I don't remember seeing 79 on here, but cool. Do we need to put our tokens and clear text in the Python script? So you don't need to, and I wouldn't recommend doing it. For our conversation today, sure, it works for us just because we're building something that will ultimately be destroyed by the end of this session. So for demonstration purposes, I'm hard coding them. But what I would recommend you doing is, again, kind of following this pattern by creating an environment variable on your operating system, either that's in on Windows or on Mac. Create your environment variables, stuff all of your secrets in there, and then use load.env to import those as objects. And so this is definitely the better way of handling this for sure. All right, so again, we know that the app, it works, and that the only functionality it can do right now is connect to the remote Slack in the sky type of thing. But it's a good start, right? Believe it or not, that's a really, really good start. All right, so let me talk about like the actual command that will be listening for our slash command. So let's create. Say good call on the rubber duck, because yeah, absolutely, Copilot's amazing. We're gonna call this respond to slash Prisma. Yeah, there we go. So we want to write some functionality now to where the Slack bot can actually do something once you issue this command, because right now it's not doing anything at all. Actually, let's run that again in the foreground. Let's run that script, python app.py, and let me run this slash Prisma again. We still get an error message saying it failed to dispatch, so nothing actually took place, even when we're running the script. All right, so we have to find some way of handling that type of specific call. And this is going to turn us into the conversation of building the Slack modals and understanding kind of what they actually look like. So let's go Slack block builder, I think, maybe. Block kit. Okay. All right, I think this is it. I always have a hard time finding this thing. If I click this, it's just going to turn me into more documentation. There's an actual block kit builder. Is this it? There we go. Perfect. Okay. So here's how we're going to build our Slack interface. Let's change this into Redtail. Okay. They've got several, many actually, pre-built templates, and they all look really cool. We want something that's going to basically just take in a user text field. We might have to build the text input ourselves, but I definitely want to start with something. Let's start with Zelda. I love that name. Let's just start with this one. This is fine. And what we can do now is, now that we've selected this template, the payload now appears on the right side of the screen. Now it appears in JSON. This is really important because what's effectively going to do, we're going to build the modal here in the block kit builder user interface, and the result on the right hand side is going to be presented as like, here's how to get it working in your script. Now, remember what I said at the very beginning, the original SDK for Bolt is written in JavaScript. And this is very lenient for that because it's literal JSON data, which JavaScript was originally built for JavaScript. But we're going to be working in the Python world, so we're going to need to change. I said change the JSON data into a Python dictionary, but everything else is going to be just rock solid. So we can start kind of building away here. Let's add something here. Let's see. How do I? Oh, I'm gonna actually have to code this out, aren't I? Okay. let's do this. Let's start with actually one of the buttons, which would be something like this. And what we'll do is we'll whenever someone enters the /Prisma command, it'll open up this menu and it'll give them with a series of different things that they can do. Do you want to configure Prisma? Do you want to pull data out from Prisma? Do you want to generate a report in Prisma? Those types of things. And that will be our menu that we've got right here. Now, when they click the button, it'll take them to a new modal, or a new page, if you will, which will effectively, that's where people will be inputting their request for data and stuff. All right. Ugh. With all that said, let me look at one of those that I've already got. Let's see. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to paste what I've got already into our script. That way we're not twiddling our thumbs for half an hour. Okay, so let's talk about this modal and what it actually does. So whenever somebody types in the /Prisma command, we've got a decorator for this Python function, right? So here's the handling of the user interface being rendered, or the modal. And we use a decorator called @app.command and then our / command. So this decorator is part of the Bolt SDK, but you'll see us using decorators for several of the different functions. Again, we're basically importing some pre-canned functionality on how to interact with the Slack bot in the background, and that's where the decorators are going to come in. So we can effectively call our functions anything. I think that's the case because all the functionality is actually really being imported through the decorators. All right. Okay. Okay, so what does all this do? Well, the very first thing that we have to do is we have to acknowledge the request that was received. So there needs to be, there's going to be an initiation of the request of the application from Slack. We need to be able to respond back. And so you'll see us using this ACK thing, but this is just one of the things you'll just have to make sure that you include, that there was an acknowledgement from some script of the actual / command that was requested. I'm adding a logo. So this will be something that's rendered within the actual user interface in here. And so you could add anything that you want. In my case, let's open up this and kind of take a sneak peek as what this will actually look like. All right. So it's going to show Prisma with the little logo and stuff. That's good enough for us. All right. And now we're calling the client, which was passed in from the SDK, and we're going to tell it, hey, we want you to open up a new view, and here's all the information about this view. Now, this is the modal that was created back up in the Slack web page that we were looking at. So whenever you get to, where are you at? Right here. Whenever you get into a position to where whatever on the left it looks like what you want, then you would copy this data and then you would insert it right here. But again, make sure that you translate the JSON into a proper Python dictionary. That's where I see most of the issues. The big thing you need to worry about is if it came from JSON, make sure that true is spelt with an uppercase T, and false is also spelt with an uppercase F. And let's see. So just some other basic things. If you've got your linter working, like in my case, I use Flake 8. You saw us install it at the beginning here. Your linter will pick up on these things, and they'll put some squiggly lines if you forgot to convert something properly. So let it do that for you. Okay, so here's the view. This is what's going to get rendered up into the Slack bot. The type is a modal. The callback is task menu. We're going to be using callbacks here quite a bit. It's basically the way that we're going to be stringing different things into each other, like different workflows. Click on this button, get redirected to this new UI. Click this submit button, and then do this specific task. The callback IDs are going to be a core component of us kind of mapping out that. For the title of the bot will just say Prisma Access Bot. It'll support emojis. That's really, really important because, you know, we want to put some rocket ships in there, right? We want to make it look snazzy. So that will be an important one. There is no submission for this initial modal because this is going to be, where'd you go? There's no like OK button on this initial user pop-up. The user is actually going to select a menu item, which will then redirect them to a new UI, which will have a button for submission. But that's why we've got it commented out right at the top right here. Sometimes, like, you're going to be creating a lot of these modals. It depends on how complex your bot is, right? But like nesting things inside of each other. If you're like me, you're either going to be relying on GitHub Copilot these days to help you guide down that. But a lot of cases, I'll leave something commented out. If I know I'm going to copy and paste this somewhere else where there may be a submit button, I'll do this. It's mostly just like helping myself in the future. Like to leave little breadcrumbs for myself. We do support the ability to close this menu. So that's what that will be. And then we get to the actual blocks. All right. So the blocks are the actual user interface components right here. So this is a block. This is a block. This is a block. Block, 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 block. Right. So we're effectively building these within the Python dictionary. And it is, as you can see, it's a list, right? So this is a sequential. So obviously the first item will render first and so on, top-down order. So we're posting the logo right here. We're calling back to that object that we created right up here, which is the URL for our logo. So type is an image URL is our object, and any alternate task, basically, if I hover my mouse over it, what would the text pop up as? Let's update this to say Prisma Access Slackbot. There's a divider. I focus a lot, probably way too much on making things look pretty, but that's effectively what these dividers are. Again, just trying to make it a little bit more user-centric, and so it's a formatting tool exclusively. Then the user is going to see, please select a task. That will be the header of the bot. Again, another divider. And then they'll have these options listed here. Retrieve site alerts. There will be a button for that. And action ID. So earlier we talked about the callback ID. We're going to be also referencing action IDs as well as what's the thing to do once this is clicked. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Let me save this and let's see if we can't give this a run. Just to kind of get an idea as to what this will actually look like. All right. And I also want to test if the slash command is going to work. Okay, it did not work. So not good. All right. Oh, I was expecting. It didn't even look like we got it, like a message was even reported back. So I'm wondering if this actually, if there's something else that we need to include in here. Let's see. The site action. Oh, we do need this. This much is true. Send the message back to the Slack channel. So this is once we get the response back from the API, we're going to want to redirect it back to the channel. It's not the thing that's broken here though. We'll pass in Slack channel right into there. Okay. Let's also change this. Oh, that's right. So importing the socket mode handler, we're running this in the sockets mode. So we need a different way of instantiating this, though the example is not conducive for what we're trying to do here. So we're going to need to start our application just in a different manner. Let's add some more little banners here just to make my eyeballs locate this easier in the future. All right. Okay. So start your app. We're going to call that socket handler. Let's pull that in here. Okay. And we're going to reference our application. And here's where we call in the Slack app token. So this is the object that we had created right up here. So, oh, am I doing this right? This might actually need to be the bot token. Let's try that. Okay. Let's close this out and run this again. Okay. Says that it's running. Let's give this another shot here. Ah, wonderful. Okay. Let's turn off dark mode so that you can see this a little bit better here. Boom. Themes, light mode. Oh, bless. Okay, there we go. And let's try to make the colors just a little bit prettier. This looks nice. I really like that blue though. Let's go with that. Okay. So let's run the command again here. Slash Prisma. And now we get our pop-up, right? So again, this was the header. Here's our image. Here's the name of our modal right here. We're just prompting them to select a task. And we retrieve site alerts and retrieve automated reports. Both of these are going to fail because we've declared the action ID, but we haven't tied it to an actual decorator object. So nothing's going to be able to execute. But let's just show you what it looks like. It should effectively time out. Yep. Okay. But a good start. Good start nonetheless. We just created our first user interface, at least on this channel. So pretty cool. Pretty cool. Let's come back into our script now. Now we want something to be able to respond to that button clicking, right? And this is also where the decorators are really going to help us out. All right, so if we look into this modal right here, the options, once we get past the header, here we've got our two options. One was retrieve site alerts, and here's the name of the button, and the action ID is site alerts. And then we've got another option right here called run automated reports, and its action ID for anytime someone clicks the button will execute automated reports. So not saying that's what we have to model after right now. Oh, here's our logs. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. We don't have to call them these, but this is just what I had previously built in the past. So good starting point for us. Let's create that second view though. Like we want the modal whenever they click the button to create or to open a new view. So we're going to close this out and we're going to say, let's click on view action modals. Okay. So let's look at this. Let's think about this for a second. Retrieve site alerts and run automated reports. I think for today, instead of site alerts, I want to just build something that will retrieve the address objects that have been configured. Or this, I mean, probably in production, you probably want something to grab security policy or shadow rules or something like that. We're just going to start with the basic example. It might not be the most practical production use case, but we'll do that. So instead of retrieve site alerts, we're going to call this something different. Let's open up our modal. And where'd you go? Okay, so instead of retrieve site alerts, retrieve address objects. And we're going to call this address objects is the action ID. Okay. This is important because now we're going to create this action ID. And let's gonna grab my example here and we'll update it. So again, looks very familiar, right? Because it's these modals are kind of like a copy paste thing, which makes the building of them quite simple. So we're gonna grab this action ID and we're gonna update this one. We're gonna say whenever automated reports, not what we're looking for, address objects. Say whenever the address objects button is clicked in the main modal view, then run this action right here. And this action is going to address objects. Let's kind of make that capital there. And address objects view. Okay. So what's happening? We're creating another Python function here called address objects view. We're passing in some basic parameters that are required by the decorator. Now, this decorator is saying this is the action that takes place whenever somebody clicks this, or not this one. Whenever somebody clicks this button within the UI, take this action. And the action is to update the view, right? We started in the main view. Now we want to go to another window. So we want to effectively clear out the main modal view and then render a new modal, a new view within its place. And that's what's happening here. So our client is, again, we have to send these acknowledgments back to the system. You'll see that design pattern used quite a bit here. And we're going to say address object report. Okay. And the client is now going to update the view. We have to pass the view ID. I don't remember why. Like here's the deal. Like the body ID, the view ID is something that's transparent to us. But the way that the SDK is written, they are still expecting us to pass the view ID, so that the way that we do that is we pull in the body view ID. It's not something you would ever see, but you definitely need to make sure that you include it. Hash body, hash string that represents the view state. So same situation, right? We have to pass in the state of the view. And that's, again, it's not something that we're statically configuring, but whenever we pass in the body, it comes along with it. So this is how we do it. I would have hoped that the SDK would have just kind of handled these things for us, because it makes working with it just kind of a little confusing. But I might be reading into it wrongly. Anyway, now here's the view that we're going to update it with. There's another one that is just, again, it has to be passed in this private metadata. It's a representation of the whole body object. Not really sure why the SDK doesn't handle it. Maybe they have, and I just haven't updated it in a while. But anyway, it's just kind of one of these weird quirks that you have to be aware of. All right. So the callback ID is to address objects. That's the view identifier. And there we go. Again, Here's the title of the modal, and here's all the individual components within it. Let's see what we've got here. We've got a title, execute automated reports from Slack. Trying to think of, well, let's just create something really simple. Let's see. Here's the search, or not the search, but here's the client input example. We'll cut this out for now. Actually, I'm just gonna leave 2 buttons, and those buttons will be, actually I'm just gonna leave 1 button. It'll be just to, oh shoot. Maybe I need that because I didn't have a button here. Let's leave it for now. Let's figure out what this, so basically what this modal, this new view is gonna do is it's going to ask the user to input some data. Let's update this description to be a little bit better. Let's see. Address objects is going to be the name. Yeah, report. Retrieve address objects. There we go. And this is just another separator. A list of addresses. Okay. What we want to do is we want the user to specify which folder that they want to look from. So we'll call this, instead of site name, we'll call it folder. Can we make a dashboard with Slack so instead of typing the / command, it's always there? I don't know. That's a really good question. There should be that functionality. Because like when you look at the app, where'd you go? When you click on voice still cracks. When you click on the app, like you have this about page, and I feel like there should be like a button that you could just like click, kind of like a dashboard type of thing, right? I should be able to click this. I'm kind of disappointed that I can't. Maybe it'll be within the back end. I don't see it. No. If you know of a way of doing that, let me know, because I would really prefer that than to always have to type the / command. Okay. Where are we at? We're back over here. So list of addresses, and we're gonna present the user with a form field that'll say name of folder, and the initial value will be shared. So if they did not, let me see, I think the initial value is they will pre-populate the form field with the word shared in this case. There's also a default, or there's another way of like providing an example but not have it like actually populated as that example, but I think this is good enough. And then there's advider, and then it says, do you have something you'd like to see automated? Here's how to, okay, that's fine. Okay, so submit, that's true. So this is our second view now. Let's go ahead and click on this, and or let's run this and see what it actually comes out to. Okay. don't know if it picked it up. I don't know if the mic just picked that up. But one of my dogs just farted. And I don't want you, if it did pick it up, I just want to be clear that was absolutely the dog. Retrieve address objects. Click here. All right, so great. That worked. So again, there's a multi-step phase here that takes place. The first thing that we do is we open the modal. Right? That was the very first function that we created, and we decorated it as such. Then we added a button, and that button had an action ID associated with it to say when this button is clicked, perform this action, and it's mapped out to this action ID. We took that, and then we created the that function that handles the clearing of the main user interface, and then the rendering of this second user interface. And that's how we got to where we are right now. And so this looks pretty good. Use emojis as much as you can. I'm not even joking. Like it makes it, don't go overboard. Try to have some taste. But honestly, it makes it a lot easier for people using this to be able to consume it. And yeah, the word shared was pre-populated. And so this is just an empty link. I've got a cancel object and I've got a submit object. If I click submit, we should see this fail for the same reason as we did before, and that there is no action that is taking place at this point. I promise you, it was the dog. I promise. Okay, we had some connection. Okay, so it's saying we've had some connection. We've had some trouble connection. Try again. Talking too much. All right, moving along though. Good progress, right? The ability to render the UI and then click in a form field button or a button and have it render a new UI. Pretty slick stuff. But now we need to map that submit button to something else. So let's look back into the view, submit. So that's the button, but what is I think the callback ID, the view ID is that, All right, let's look at my previous, has been submitted with the input. Okay, so this is what's gonna run next. Okay, so we're gonna create some more comments here, and we're gonna say when automated reports button is clicked, not in the main modal, but in the secondary menu. And it's not automated reports, it's address object report. Okay. No. What am I thinking? Get back here. Shoot. I already forgot what the UI looks like. Open this up here. All right, when the name of folder has been submitted. All right, when name of folder text input has been submitted within the secondary menu, then we want to run this callback ID of address objects, and we're going to call this view address objects view. Now, this is something that I struggled with when I was first coming to this SDK, because when I think of the word view, I think of a user interface, and that's not what's happening here. The view is actually taking in the submission of that form field and then taking some kind of action. So here's the action, right? So don't think of view, don't be like me and think like, oh, they use the word view, that's the actual user interface, because that's not what's taking place. This is like the submission of the view. This is what's happening. All right, so we call in the app decorator of app.view and again point to the callback ID of this right here, and pass in the acknowledgement, the body, which is effectively what was submitted, our custom logger object, and the client. And this is where the interaction with the Prisma Access API is going to take place, where we're going to send the request for the data, and then receive that data. And I think the actual posting back into the Slack channel also takes place. I think that's why we're also importing the client object. Let's see. Address object EU from 129. It's true, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. Obviously, I would try not to reuse the same name of a function, but the app decorators makes it completely separate. So not sure if that's going to be an issue, but I don't think it will. All right, so submission of our folder name. So again, we got to respond back to the UI, give it a clear message to clear the UI. Then we're going to log a message through our custom logger, which you can see is already working right here. And then we're going to define the input site object. Okay, this is incorrect. We're going to say create the input folder name object based on the body passed with the submission. All right, so body, state, values, and then the name of the thingy, which was address objects. And we're going to call this folder name. And we're also passing in the form values aren't the only thing that are passed into the body when you submit. Again, there's state of the application that's also passed in, but also that includes like the user that actually had submitted the request. So you have the opportunity of capturing which user fired off the request. This is helpful when you want to maybe have the bot reply in a direct message, or maybe have the bot like highlight somebody's name and said, so-and-so asked for the address objects and here they are. And that user will be tagged. This is a way of incorporating that. All right, so we're going to iterate over the folder name object, which I think it should be empty. And we're going to ask for user input, set it equal to the value. So yeah, the key value pair, you basically only care about the value, right? You don't care about the name of the form field. You only care about the value. So this is what we're going to do in order to get that value out. So the user input, whatever they put inside of that form field, whether it's shared or service connections or something else, we're gonna capture that data and we're gonna call it user input. And then we're gonna formulate a message. This message will be, looks like it's gonna just kind of debug to the console probably. The user's input, so whatever they filled into the form, and then the name of the user. We're not calling that just yet. We'll see when we do. Yeah, here's me doing the speed run test, right? The speed test. So I have set kind of like a timestamp mechanism for me to understand how long it takes for this communication to actually go through. And that's what we're seeing right here. I don't think this is right, but this is a good enough starting place. Yeah, okay, so let's just talk through this. This is the actual API integration, or the actual interaction with the API that's going to take place. It looks like previously I had some kind of query parameter. I don't think I'm going to use that. But here we're pulling in the API object. This is going to be the class object that enables us to handle all the interaction with the Prisma API. And we're going to use this kind of pattern here in order to, again, create the instance of the API interaction, send in our request. We're going to get the data by executing a GET request and storing that locally in our Python dictionary. And then we're going to cite alerts. That's interesting. Oh, this was a two-step process. Okay, I see what's going on here. This, okay, that's fine. Not going to worry about this. And then this is where we will actually return the request object, or the payload of the message. We'll run it through a Jinja 2 template, and we'll store that as our, we'll send that message back to Slack. So that's how all the things happening right there. Let me comment this out for now, because this is all incorrect. And I will include, we'll comment this out as well. We'll just say that the, we'll just comment it out and send the message to Slack. So I guess what I'll leave this with is message equals, let me look at that Jinja template and figure out. We'll say hello world. I just want to validate that this button clicking is gonna mean something. And what we'll do is we'll probably take a short break after this. I need to take the dogs out, and then we'll get to actually building out the Prisma API functionality. So let's clear this out, run this again, and close this out. All right. There's our UI. Click here. There's that. Let's click the submit button. And it didn't have an action. I thought try message equals world. I thought this was going to be good enough, but maybe not. Let's see. Oh, key error address objects. So body, view, state, values, address objects. So it was unable to find the folder name. We were asking to look in the address objects, but that didn't come through. Let's look at that real quick. Blocks. There's header. Block ID is folder. Okay. So folder is what we're looking for. Makes more sense. All right. Let's close this out and run this back. All right. Well, at least the UI closed gracefully. Let's see. Missing scope needed. Oh, interesting. Provided. All right, so it looks like there's an OAuth permissions issue. And here's what it's saying. It says it's missing the ability to write. So what's going to happen is we're going to have to generate a new OAuth token for the bot that gives him permission, or her permission, to write some message, because it's missing right now. Channels history, groups history, IM history. Okay, cool. Then let's come back into the UI. That was a nice, helpful error message. Let's go into permissions, and let's look at adding an OAuth scope for, let's see, chat write. I think that was it. Let's do that. So immediately it tells us you got to reinstall your app in order for the permissions update it. But let me just come back to the code real quick. Missing scope. It needed chat write bot. Well, I could only give it chat write, so I hope that was good enough. Chat write. Let me just make sure that there's no chat write public customize. I think we'll be okay. All right. So let's reinstall the app. I think it's just as simple as clicking that. There we go. Yes. Allow. Please. There we go. Okay. Maybe it didn't regenerate. Let's look at our auth token here. That ends in COC. All right. And coming up here, this also, okay, so interesting, the bot token isn't regenerated like I thought it was, but you do have to reinstall the app for the permissions to take place, which totally makes sense. Get it. All right, so let's reinstantiate our application now. And let's try this little thing again. Ah, okay. All right. So we're in a really good position right now. We've got the app all set up within the Slack or api.slack.com. Right? We built the foundations of the application, handled things like permissions, and told it to run in socket mode, and got all the tokens and all that good stuff. And then we built the modal for the slash command for slash Prisma. We talked through like the user interface aspects, how those different blocks come into play, and also how to handle certain events. In this case, handle the ability to create a new UI once somebody clicks a button. In this case, they clicked on address objects, and it cleared the old UI and opened up a new screen or new user interface, and also passed in data from the input field. So we presented the user with the field to input the name of the folder. Maybe that should be a drop-down menu. That should also, honestly, that should be a drop-down menu. We'll see if we can't change that. But anyway, the user was presented with the new UI. They entered the data. They clicked the submit button, and then we had the view within the code take a specific action whenever that button is submitted. That's the last part of this. It's where we're going to build the interaction with the Prisma Access API. And this is where we're going to start to need to do our data modeling. We're going to be building some data models in Pydantic to do some validation, also to handle with like JSON conversion, all the good stuff. But that will be the very next piece. We'll take a break because I'm happy with where we've gotten. How long we've been at it? 2 hours. Not too bad. All right, so we'll take a break. Let my dogs have some sunlight. Let me have some sunlight, and we'll come back in. Let's see, it's 1:22. Let's come back in 15 minutes. Guys, get some food. All right. There we are. We're back. Oh. I just realized you guys have been staring at my face this whole time. I did not know. Let me free you from that burden. Okay. We're almost done with the Slack bot. We've got a functioning app so far. What we do need to do is we need to pull in the Python package to let us work with the Prisma Access API. And I'm trying to make my mind up on this. Like, either we'll use the request library to interact with the API, or we'll use the SDK. I'm kind of leaning on the SDK. Let's come back here and look in my folder. Pan API, yeah, it's this one right here. So effectively, again, we need to interact with the Prisma Access API. There is a software developer kit already in Python that I've been using inside of my Ansible collection. Where is it? There we go, right here. And I'm thinking of just kind of sticking with this because it handles the OAuth process for us, and we already know that it works. So I'm thinking that this is probably the route that I'm going to go. So let's import this into our, let's see, where's this Slack here? Got some messages from a teammate. Please stand by. Okay. All right. Nothing too important. All right. Okay. So we want to import this API into our Python library, and I'm trying to think of how to do that with Poetry. Let's see. Poetry add, and I'll paste in the URL. Let's see if that works. Could not parse it. Is it because it's needs to be HTTP? Nope. Poetry add. There we go. Easy enough. Poetry add, the name of the package, throw the flag of Git, and then point to the Git repo. You liars. The internet is a liar sometimes. Poetry add. Let's look into this. Let's see. A Git URL. Oh, we got to do it like this. All right. Git plus. All right. Okay. There's a clash of dependencies here. What's going on? I don't remember installing. Because Pan API depends on request 281. Oh, okay. So the problem that we have is that we installed request before we installed Pan API, and Pan API requires version 228.1. So I pinned the version, and then the one that we installed here locally exceeds that. So there's the conflict. There's blood on the streets. Let's fix this. Poetry shoot. Remove. Poetry help. And there's a way of removing the package. Oh, poetry list. Yeah, poetry remove. Poetry remove. Requests. All right. Now let's install that repository again. I should have cleared the dependency issue, and it did. So cool. So cool. Now we just need to write this script that will effectively handle this communication to Pan API, or Pan API library. All right, so we will close out the modal. We'll close out the action. We will close out the view. Remember, it's the view that does the heavy lifting. This is where we're going to need to build our our interaction with the remote service. And I'm thinking the right way to do this is to import it from another Python script. That way we have all of the Slack related stuff here, and then we initiate some kind of import from another file, and make sure that we have a return value. Yeah, I think this is the way to do it. Okay, so let's create a new script here. We're going to call this, let's call it Prisma, because that's what it is. Prisma.py. This is going to be interact the Prisma API through Pan API SDK. All right, and we should be able to now, let me just test this, that I want to be able to import the Pan API library. Let's make sure that's installed here. panapi.config import objects. It's panconfig objects import address object. Oh, it's just address. Okay. All right, great. So just validating that the SDK was successfully installed in our Python environment, because we're going to use that now to import all of the goodies. Hold on, I got another work Slack message. Please stand by. Okay. 140. Okay. Work comes first, and so it shall. All right. So this will be our script to interact with the Prisma through the SDK. So let's kind of build out our example here. We need to be able to handle the authentication. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure we got some examples. Yeah, there we go. Let's first import Pan API. Oh, nope. We'll import specifically the stuff, the goodies that we need. All right, so we'll say from panapi.config.objects import, and it's going to be address and probably address group too. All right, that's all that's needed to do that. Let's check out what else our script will. Okay, so we need to be able to pass in our authentication into the session. Is there a way to get the Apple computer to stop doing this stuff? I don't want the. All right. So first things first, after we do the imports, the first thing is to authenticate with the API. So we're gonna need to be able to pull in our environment variables for our Prisma access. Again, the username, password, and TSG, the tenant ID. We'll use that information to authenticate our session to Prisma and get a token. And once we have the token, we should be able to pull in all of the address objects. I feel like we should be able to. I'm hoping we can. I feel like, is there a method inside of this SDK? Hold on. Before we go down this route, it might be easier to just use request, but let's look into this. Config. Actually, I want to look at the there is the create read list. So there's a couple of methods here. We're not going to be creating address objects, but I think this is to read the details of a specific object. I think in this case we want to use list because we want to list all of the resources of this type. So our script will look just a little bit different than the example here because in this example I was creating an address object. But what we'll do instead, we'll say it's going to be session.valid address object 1 . Okay. I'm going to need to be able to create an address object, pass in the folder. But I wonder if I'm going to have to pass in a name too. I wonder if there's a way of just getting the existing address objects without creating a new one. One would hope so. We'll see. Address. But I do need to pass in that parameter. Okay, we'll see. We'll see how far we get. So I'm going to say session equals pan API. It's not dot panorama. It's pan API session. Oh, we need to pass in. Okay. Let's import pan API. And then we'll say pan API dot pan API session, and this is where we're going to pass in our username and password and all that good stuff. But before we get to there, let's move our dot environment. Wait a minute. No. We're going to pass in the parameters from this script. Is that right? Yeah. We'll do that. Right here. So Prisma API. And it was session. thinking about what's the best way of handling this. I feel like I should mitigate that. Keep the environment variables limited to the Prisma script itself. And I can probably remove that one now. Okay. This isn't a issue, it's a spelling issue. Can I disable my spell check, please? Spell check. Okay, so we're good there. That should have, oh, I have to import OS as well. All right, and then we will pass in this information into our authentication object here. And this is done. We use this inside of the Ansible collection that we've been building. So let's sneak a peek over there. So it effectively looks like this. We create a session object, which we're doing right now, and then we pass in all of these. Oh, that's right. I have to. Oh, I forgot about this. So we'll see if we run into that problem, and I'll talk through it. All right, so we create an instance of the object. Now we're going to authenticate into that object, and the Prisma client ID is going to be set to this. The Prisma client secret is going to be set to this. The scope is going to be set to this. And the better way, you're probably already thinking about it, is let's just add this instead. Let's make this go like this. And there's our secret. And the tenant ID will go right here. Okay, that might work. So the load will effectively happen in line now. We won't have a dedicated space in our, there we go. I think that'll work. All right, that will handle the authentication. So let's talk about this. This is an annoyance of mine. The annoyance isn't with Prisma Access, it's with Java Web Tokens, with the JSON Web Tokens. Currently, the library for the authentication. So there's like some kind of there's a validation step that happens after you authenticate. And right now, the way that the API or the SDK for authenticating is, it's not a float, it's an integer. And it causes like this a condition to where it tries to log in with the token. I'm sorry, with a timestamp that's the exact timestamp that it was handed out, and it invalidates the check. And so I don't think I'll run into that problem, but I'll incorporate it anyway. It's a small little like what do you call it? Just inserting a small little delay. Okay, so there's the authentication portion. We'll definitely want to probably wrap this up in functions here soon enough. But for now, I think we'll just continue to build upon this. So once we have our session token, we should be able to say address 1 equals, and this is where we'll pull in the address object. Again, we need to pass in the name. We need to pass in the folder. And this is going to be something that was passed in through the app itself, because the folder was declared right here. So what we really need to do, like after this script, after we get it to work, we're going to want to wrap this in as a class object and break these individual components into small little methods, including the authentication, but also we want to be able to have a way of passing in this value into right here. So we're going to need to be able to count to that. I feel like this is interesting just because of the way the SDK is structured. We have to create an instance of the address object before we can do the list method. There might be another clever way that I'm unaware of, but we effectively have to, just because of the way the SDK is structured, we have to create a dummy object here. Actually, let's close this out. And let me just hard code shared for now. And then we'll say address1.list, and then we'll ask for the session. We'll pass in the session token, and we'll call this list of addresses. This will be the response from the API, and then we will currently we'll just print this out to the screen, but ultimately we will do a return statement which will return this back into our app script over here, right? So I'm going to tie all those pieces together here soon enough. But let's see first if we can execute this script. I want to test whether or not we can successfully authenticate, and I want to be able to figure out, I want to first validate that this will actually work. It's kind of sloppy, but it's not too bad. All right, so let's go ahead and run this guy. Prisma Pi, okay. All right, it doesn't look like we were able to successfully authenticate. And it might be because of the way that I'm doing this right here. Let me validate something off screen real quick. Make sure those variables actually exist. Ah, one of them's incorrect. Okay, so the actual one is Prisma tenant, Prisma client secret. Yeah, those are good. All right, let's try this again. All right, good. All right, so what were we able to do? The most important thing is we were able to validate that we were successfully authenticated to the system. Our first one was failed because I had the incorrect environment variable inside of my hidden config file. So that's the reason why the first one failed. But we got through the authentication issue. We waited for 1.1 seconds. Again, just making sure that we elapse a full second before we use the API token, or else OAuth complains. Okay, and then we create this dummy object, only because we need the method of listing, which we only have access to if we create an instance of that object. So once we do that, we store the output in a config object's address object right here. So we basically have a list and we have a single object in there. There's a way of getting what's in that object, because we're going to need to be able to return that. Let's look back into the SDK, and this is the wrong place. Config init read list update delete. All right, and let's dig into the objects. And there's really not a whole lot going on here. These are basically the REST API endpoints that we're hitting. But I feel like there's a here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna set a trace on this file, and we're gonna dig into this this list of address objects. We're gonna see what kind of things are available for us. So we're gonna say import PDB, or actually import IPDB. We had installed this at the beginning through our developer dependencies. And I'm going to use it now to kind of put a break inside of the code so that we can dig into this list of address objects. We're going to say IPDB set trace right there. And yeah, clear the session. Let's run the script again. Good old Python debugging. All right, so here we are. If I let this continue, the next line of code that it'll do is it'll print the list of addresses. But let's look into that object before we actually do that. So we're going to say type list of addresses. And as we know, we got a list that came back. Now, what about the first object? Because we saw there's only one object inside of that list. And the type is PanAPI config objects address. All right. So let's say address equals list of addresses 0. Basically creating a new object called address and setting it equal to this right here. Now, if we again just do a type on address, we're going to get back the same thing we got above, which is here it is. But let's dig into this a little bit and see what kind of options are available for us. So we've got some default hidden methods right here. That's fine. The one I'm looking for is I want to be able to read this. So let's look at the read method. So we'll say address.read. And it says it's missing. Oh, that's not what I want. That's to do the API call. Let's do address.name. Let's do Palo Alto's network sinkhole. So that's the name of the object. And anything else about it? Description maybe? Address.description. Palo Alto network sinkhole. All right, so where did it get this from? Well, let's log in and figure that out. Let's use my work browser. I gotta say, like it's a lot easier handling streaming off of the Mac. Not anything really natively inherent about the Mac. It's just working on Windows. I was working through a VM, and I think that was the biggest issue because I had a hard time kind of pulling Windows off screen when it was a VM. All right, so let me disable dark mode, and let's come back into my instance. I'm almost done logging in, I promise. So if I look into the Prisma access, into, let's see, configuration, objects, addresses, there is one address object called this. Let's change this into a different directory. Let's look at service connections. Okay, here's one where I've got a little bit more going on. So let's change the shared folder to be service connections instead. Obviously, we'll eventually pass that, but for now, we're going to hard code it. Okay. So same as before, let's just dig into a list of addresses. Look at the, let's look at this. There should be 2 entries this time, and there are. All right, so let's loop over this. So for each and list of addresses, we're going to print out each.name and print out each.description. And we're also going to add a line break. Okay. There we go. Let's see what it looks like. There. Very cool. Okay. So this actually came from the shared folder. This was directly within the service connection folder. But just how inheritance works within the solution, subsequent folders, obviously nested underneath the shared, would inherit the shared as well. So very, very cool. We also see the Postman test in here as well, and we see both of those objects represented in here. And this is really all that I'm looking for, having to be returned into the Slack bot. Again, probably not the most groundbreaking use case, but hopefully it kind of shares the thought process of how to connect these different components together to really build a solution that really fits whatever needs that you have. I'm going to call this, instead of address 1, I'm going to call it dummy, because it really is a dummy address object. We're not doing anything with this address object other than looking in what folder was passed and then grabbing similar ones with the list method. But the name is required whenever you create an address object. So we had to pass something, but the object isn't really ever used for anything else. So we can just leave that be. But that's how you use IPDB. It's a nice little set trace. Some other people like to insert breaks into VS Code. I've never done that. I'm sure there's a good way of doing it. If you guys know, let me know. But I'm not sure. All right, so that's pretty easy, right? Let's now take this and let's create a class object, and then we'll call the object from our script. And Okay, had another idea. I think this script should just handle the authentication, and that's it. The reason being is that I don't want to have multiple scripts for each execution, right? I wonder if I should leave that functionality in there, or maybe I break it up even further. Maybe we have the authentication script, and then each individual option would run its own separate Python script. I think that's what we'll do. I'm gonna modularize this. Okay. So what we will do is we will comment out this goodie, and we are going to return the session object. So we're going to return session. Now return right now in this context isn't really doing anything. Let's also comment this out. Let's Yep, I need time. I need, okay, so you still need these. So this script will now be repurposed. This is the authentication to Prisma access. Yep. And what we'll do is we'll create a class object. We'll call this class Prisma authenticate. And we'll indent this just a bit here. Just kidding. There we go. And all right, there we go. Prisma authenticate. We handle the session, and then we return session. Why is this? Okay, so right. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. We need to create a class object here for Prisma authentication. But I'm going to set this, going to have to structure this in kind of an interesting fashion. And I'm wondering if I'm overcomplicating it, because we already have something that's actually working. And I don't know if creating a separate class object really provides us with anything, because this, yeah, it doesn't. Thank you for talking me off the edge. Let's just rename this as Prisma authenticate. And we'll run this as a function. Well, that's commented out. And so in our app, oh, let's rename the file too. All right, so up here, we're going to say from authenticate import Prisma authenticate. So that will allow us to call this function. We also want to pass in the, no, I don't need to pass in the folder there. I don't need to pass anything into there. I like this. This is clean. Obviously this needs to go, but as far as the session authentication, I think this is good. This will return the session object, which will have the access token. And yeah, this is good. I'm happy with this. All right, so from authenticate, import this, that's good. Now let's come back into our actual script. And this is where we want to say session will be equal to Prisma authenticate, and that will complete that. So whatever the result of this is, which unfortunately will take a full second, we will get the session object back. And we should be able to now import the Python SDK into this script. No, we're going to delegate that, aren't we? Yep, we are. Okay, so let's write that next script again. This is going to be get, we'll just call this address objects. All right, coming back into here, we're going to import this doohickey, and from panapi.config.objects import address and address group. And then let's kind of, oops, where did this go? There we go. Okay. And then we will say, we'll call a new function, get address objects. We will expect that the session will be passed into this. Let's see here. Okay. Oops, let's remove this. There we go. All right, that's simple enough. That will return our Python list. Equals all right. So here we're just there. Let me comment this out. I don't care about the timestamp. There's our list. And we just need to return a string. So I can't return the pan API address object. So we need to translate the objects inside of this list into a string, and that will be returned into the Slack channel. So we'll call this Slack. Oh man, let's just say addresses equals an empty list, and then for each and existing address objects, we're going, there we go. Look at that. Lovely. All right. So we created an empty list, and then we are looping over the list of existing objects, and then we're appending to this empty list the name of each of the objects. Let's also, oh man, I don't want just the name though. I want the name and the description. Let's start off with name, and then we'll look at changing this to be more of a complex data structure. Complex, it'll be a dictionary. I'm trying to sound smart. It'll be a dictionary. And then addresses will, addresses will still be in a list. I need it to be in a string format. I guess we could do a join. We could do a join. For now, let's just print out. No. Let's do a string of the addresses, and then we'll print that out. Okay. Ultimately, what we'll do is, like what we have here, is we'll run the address list through a Jinja 2 template, and that will ultimately render a much prettier message. But for now, we're just going to print this to the screen. Let's see if this works. Doesn't look like it does. Let's figure out why. Okay. Okay. Yeah, this makes sense. Okay, so we tried to dig into the each object, which was that was the panapi.config.objects for address type. And we tried to call into it like it was a Python dictionary, but it's like, bro, you can't do that, man. So what we need to do is we need to get the attribute instead. We can't. This is kind of like explicit to dictionary. I think we can just do this actually. Let's try that. I think that'll work. Each.name. Exit. Please exit. All right. Ah, it worked. Okay, awesome. Again, we had to pass in a string, and we just basically typecasted our list object to be a string in this case, but we got the data back. And if we run that again, let's run it back, boys. Let's run it back. If we run this one again, Prisma, and this time changed shared to be service connections. We should get the postman. Oh, yeah, there we go. Oh, right. We actually hard coded service connections in the script. So let's remove that hard coding. It's going to be right in here. Maybe it's not. Oh, it's actually in this script right here. Let's change this back to shared. Let's run it back. Actually, no, we're hard coding it. It's never going to be service connections. Okay. So what we need to do now is we need to also change this to include folder. And this will be equals folder. Now, whenever someone calls the get address objects method or function here, we need to also pass in the folder name. Which we already know as being equal to user input. So we will look at get address objects, pass in the session, and also pass in the folder name. It doesn't have to match on both sides. So user input, actually, let's just go ahead and make it match on all sides. There we go. All right, now I should be able to either rely on the default shared or pass in service connections. It won't be hard coded. I am terrible at spelling today. Maybe I'm terrible every day. It's just the camera's not on. I'll never tell. All right, hit the submit button. That should return the shared. So postman test should be removed. All right, and now if I run this back and say service connections, and again, we need to change this to a drop-down menu. Now I should also get postman test. All right, cool. So definitely works. Good. Removing all the hard coding stuff. Oh, all right. We want to template this. We want to make this look pretty. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to create a new folder called templates. And inside of here, we're going to create a new template. It's going to be called address objects.j2. Boy, we're just touching everything today. We're touching Jinja, we're touching Python, we're touching SDKs, we're touching Slack, we're doing all kinds of cool stuff, man. All right, we're going to pass in our address objects into this, and we're going to uncomment this out, and then comment out this. Okay, so Prisma request, what is that method from? I think dot template. Please stand by. So in a previous life, when I wrote this, I had imported, oh, we got to do this at the top. Got to import some Jinja 2 to help with the templating. So we're going to say from Jinja 2 import environment and file system loader. The environment basically sets up the Jinja 2 environment, and file system loader allows Jinja 2 to interact with your local file system to pull in the template folder like we've got right here. So we need to, before we even get to this point right here, let's set up Jinja 2 parameters. You can't see it, but I'm waiting for a sneeze. As soon as I say it, it goes away. All right, so let's get back. Jinja 2 parameters. So we're going to tell Jinja 2 where to look for our templates. And we're going to say it's in a directory called templates. We're also going to set the environment to be equal to that, right? So we're basically creating this instance of this object and passing in templates as the parameter. And then we pass that in as a parameter when we load the Jinja 2 environment. Also going to do a couple of things here, pass some additional Jinja 2 configuration parameters. We're going to trim blocks. We're going to L strip, so strip to the left and strip to the right. If you work a lot with Python, you're ultimately going to find yourself working a lot with Jinja 2. And I recommend that you kind of get familiar with this pattern of kind of setting up your environment, setting up a dedicated folder for all of your templates, and learn what trim blocks, L strip, and R strip. Basically, it's going to help with white spacing at the end of the day. Help you control how Jinja 2 handles white space. Without them, it can get really ugly really quick. All right. And I think it's in here. Yeah, this is the bulk of our logic. We're going to call templates. Let me see how I did this in the past. Template. All right. Response equals payload, return message. Render. Okay, addresses, template file. I think I'm just going to run this, right? Oops. Template.render and addresses equals addresses. Oops. Address equals, I'm sorry. All right. I think that's right. So this is the Jinja 2 environment. We're telling it to get the template called address objects. This will reference the folder that we set up in the environment called templates, and we'll look for this file name called address objects. And that will be stored as our template. That is a template object at that point, which has a method associated called render. It's going to render that template, but we have the opportunity to pass in some variables. In this case, I'm passing in the variables of the list of addresses that we had appended that came from the API. The result of that template rendering will be a string that's called message, and that will be ultimately what's sent back to the Slack channel. So let's build out our Jinja 2, and we should be good to go after this point. We'll say Prisma addresses. It's good enough. And we're going to say total addresses is going to be, oops, addresses dot total. Actually, I don't have a, was it addresses dot length? Yeah, that'll be good. All right, the reason why I'm using the underscores is not for Jinja 2. Well, I mean, it's just to help with formatting. Slack will receive this string, which is the result of this template, and it will render it as markdown. So if I've got these little dashes or underscores here, that will italicize that result, making it look nice and pretty. Now let's iterate over this list of address objects. And we're going to say for each and addresses. And let's go ahead and close out our loop. End for. All right, just good practice here. And we're going to, let's do a little bit of additional logic inside of here, actually. Let's say if each dot name is defined, and it should be, then I want it to, let's do a white small square. Again, this is just markdown that I'm doing here. I'm going to say each dot name and mark down that. And okay, let's end this little loop, end if, and let's do something for the description. If each dot description is defined, we're going to do the same thing. Let's end the loop and say oops, white small square, which will produce like a little dot next to the value. Makes it a little bit easier to see, hopefully. Each dot description. All right, that's really it. This will be what's printed out into the Slack message, the response object that comes back. This will be a full string that's rendered as markdown. So we can use emojis like this, and we can use italicizing like this. We can bold fonts like this. That should do it. Let's run this through. Okay, oh, no module called Jinja 2. They're totally right. Poetry add Jinja 2. All right. Okay. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. The moment we've been waiting for. Let's do Prisma return address objects. Let's do service connections. Okay. All right. We almost got there. So it did go through the Jinja 2 template, but it fell over on its face. What did we do wrong? I think it's something that, however I'm referring to these variables in the template, it's not right. Because we basically got an empty result. So addresses, length, that should be right. For each, and addresses. Addresses dot length. I think the dot length is isn't this a method? I don't even know if that'll work. Trying to solve both problems at once, but that's not the right way. So let's just kind of work through this here. Okay, so list object has no attribute of length. Is that right? It's len, right? You guys are probably screaming at me right now, and you're not. Good. List object has no attribute of len. Well, I'm not trying to call the len. I'm trying to call the. Oh, is it? As you can see, a lot of my development is a bunch of trial and error, and I don't think I'm alone in that. Let's. Okay, so it's not really happy. Oh, wait a minute. There's a Jinja 2 template for this, right? Like this. It would take probably 2 seconds of Googling, and I insist on just brute forcing it. That worked. Okay, let's run it back. And this time we'll pick on service connections. That total address is service connections. There we go. Okay, good. This is working. Let me clean up some of this. So what have we just done? Well, we've successfully been able to use the SDK, the Pan API SDK, to authenticate to Prisma, to request a list of address objects from a certain directory or a certain folder, and run the response through a Jinja template and produce it to the screen as a string value. There's still the fact that this is missing, so we need to go through this right now. For each and addresses, so I feel like this loop is actually being initiated, but these are not being matched. So let's print out the entire object. So this is each. Yeah, let's just run this. Let's see what it does. A poor man's kind of debugging. Oh, man, it actually worked. It actually gave me the name. Didn't give me the description. I must have... So I thought the return object was going to give us the... Oh, that's right. Right now, the return object... If we just call it... Let me... Well, I mean, it worked. I'm happy. I'm happy. Let's run it back with service connections. Ah, very good. All right, so it gave me both. So what I actually should do is in the template, let's just kind of do this. And that. Very good. So there's that little white emoji I was talking about earlier. Just kind of makes it help stand out just a little bit. Well, there we did it. Believe it or not, we did it. And not too many errors. Oh, sorry, DevNet Dan. Yeah, length is a filter. It is a Jinja 2 filter. Sorry I didn't see your message in time. But Jinja 2 filters... And you were probably answering this as I was trying to stumble through this. But length. Yep, so here's the built-in filters. Length is the one that we ultimately rolled with right there. So very, very cool. Very cool. You know... For not having built a Slack bot within the last few months, I'm kind of surprised that we had as limited amount of issues as we did. I'm pretty happy. Well, it definitely helped that I had an example that I had built about 4 months ago, and that we were able to import a lot of the functionality on this. The things that I would do to improve this script before shipping it into production. One, I would wrap this as a Docker container, which would mean kind of restructuring some of the formatting of the project itself. So at the root of the project, I would have like a Docker folder, which would have inside of it a Docker file and list of requirements. Then I would have like a dedicated Slack or an app folder, and I would have all of these contents that we're showing right here on this side, from template down to authenticate. I would stuff that into the app folder, and then I would have the Docker file pull in that app folder as well as all the dependencies, and basically instantiate this as a Docker container service, and ultimately deploy it on a Kubernetes host or just anything really that can run Docker. And I think that's the way that I would improve it. Let me think anything else. No, I mean, honestly, it's not too much. Like especially if you're working with, if you use the Bolt SDK, ton amount of work is taken care of for you. Again, the ability to use sockets, so you don't need to expose ports on your firewall. That is killer, right, within itself. All the authentication, the OAuth, it really handles everything. So using the Bolt SDK is much more streamlined than the previous way, which was kind of writing these things by hand. Additionally, using another SDK, so if you're working with a network device that has an SDK, and just import it into your script, just like what we did here. In my case, I broke out the authentication into its own separate function in a different script, and then did something for address objects. Honestly, what you could probably do is you could probably wrap it all up in a big class object and then write, separate methods within there. Maybe a method for authentication, and then have like a method for address objects or whatever. It ultimately comes back to how big you're going to scale this and how you want to structure everything. One thing I'm disappointed in is I didn't get to really go down the rabbit hole of building out data models to do input validation and return value validation. I was going to do that using Pydantic, but as usual, I got a little bit ambitious at the start of the stream and didn't really think it was going to take us. I thought we would get to here a little bit faster than what we did, but that's okay. So it happens when you have me talking. It slow things down and bring your earbuds. But other than that, we were successful. We've got a simple proof of concept where we're able to talk to a remote system. This could be a network device, as long as it has a REST API, basically. No, not even that. You could import NetMiko or PyEasy if you're doing Juniper stuff, or Arista's eAPI, which I think still goes over HTTP. But you don't have to. Like, that's the beauty about working in Python, is that you've got so many network-friendly libraries that you can simply import into a script like this and have them execute against your various network devices. One other thing I would improve is I would go back to the block kit builder back here, and I would change the text input field into something that has a drop-down menu. Let's see. Yeah, let's use this one, for instance. I would use something like this. So this gets called add me to your channel. One of these is going to be the drop-down menu, and you have to pass in choices within there. I don't see where that is. Anyway, that's another way that I would try to improve this. Let me figure that out. Let's use this. And this is edit it, read it, save it. Okay, so yeah, you would have a static select. This is the drop-down menu right here. And then the options are all the entries within this list. So for me, I know that on the Prisma SASE solution regarding folders, we have shared folder. Then we have a specific one for remote networks, another one for service connections, another one for mobile users. And so I would declare those statically within these choices rather than require somebody to type it into the form field. But other than that, guys, thanks for hanging out for so long. Almost 4 hours. Thanks again. Hopefully this was beneficial. Hopefully it helped kind of spurn some ideas on what you can do. Just again, kind of re-emphasizing this art of possibility. We're really only limited to our own creativity as far as what we can build, and try to match it up into some kind of benefit to our organization. That makes us infinitely more valuable than just showing up every day, when you can start building these really cool tools. Other than that, I'm going to sign off. Everyone enjoy your weekend. We will not be here next Friday. I will be on the road, but we will follow it up on the following Friday, which will be St. Patrick's Day. So if you'd rather code than go get smashed on St. Patty's Day, we'd be happy to have you.